Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and we'll be talking today with Arlington County Board Chair Christian Dorsey, as well as Board Member Eric Gutschall, about the actions the board took at its March meeting and what those actions mean to you, your neighborhood, and our community. Christian, Eric, thank you both very much for being here today. Well, let's start off with the topic that has been on everyone's mind for the last, I can't imagine. But of course, the board had its vote at the March meeting on the Amazon performance agreement. Now, it was a rather long meeting, shall we say, a bit drawn out, but give us the highlights reel, as it were.
Highlights. I think the highlight must be that the board voted 5-0
yes.
to approve the performance agreement, and that belies what was a very contentious meeting in terms of the perspectives that we heard. We had roughly 100 members of our community come out to speak. If you were doing a tale of, or doing an accounting of who was for and who was against, it was probably 50-50. But really what it was important for us to do was to have a very public conversation, not just for people in the room, but for people who may be tuning in, to understand what this performance agreement is, since that was something that had not necessarily penetrated everyone.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I think a lot of folks thought initially that this was a vote on whether the company was coming here or not.
Right.
And that's not what this vote was about at all. This
That's
was
right.
about the specific countywide incentives plan. Give me a few of those details,
Sure.
specifically what you considered and voted on in this plan.
Well, and that part was actually very simple. It's whether or not Arlington would give a direct financial incentive to Amazon to build and occupy square footage in Crystal City and Pentagon City. So our agreement, very creative and innovative and hailed as a model for how communities should pursue economic development. We didn't divert any resources from any existing programs. We didn't take the property tax and give that to Amazon. We came up with new money, if you will. So if Amazon helps contribute to a growth in the transient occupancy tax, the tax paid by hotel visitors, if that tax grows, and only if it grows, Amazon will be eligible for a small percentage of that growth. In this case, 15% of just the growth in that tax. So two conditions have to be met. It has to grow in order for Amazon to be eligible for money, and then they also have to build and occupy square footage according to a schedule that was laid out in the agreement. Now, all told, we project that that could be $23 million. But the important thing is that's not guaranteed. It's pay for performance. If the tax grows and if they occupy the square footage, then they will be eligible for that small increment.
And I think it's important for folks to also know that Amazon gets 15% of that growth, and then the county is getting the rest of that growth funding.
Correct.
So a win-win in that regard.
Right.
How about the rest of the incentive package? That $23 million was the direct incentive. Where is that indirect incentive? Some of the TIF funding and the other programs, where is that going, and where are Arlingtonians going to see the benefit there?
The indirect incentives, and people sometimes hear these big, huge numbers, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's true. There are hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to get from the state, and there's money that we are putting in. They're all towards infrastructure, things that we've already said as a community that we're going to do, that the board has already adopted in our capital improvement plan. And the big win for Arlington in this is also that we are getting that additional money from the state that we never would have gotten. We had one member of the public who testified on Saturday. I think that was actually a highlight. We all agree. Miss June O'Connell, I think she nailed it. She said, take the money from the state because we wouldn't otherwise get it. So we're going to use that to invest in things like a second metro entrance, improvements to Route 1 that are going to make it more pedestrian friendly, bicycling infrastructure, other things in the both in the area and the surrounding Crystal City, Pentagon City neighborhoods, to make sure that it's the kind of place it has the livability of what we want for our citizens, and also, frankly, what Amazon has said that they want for their employees and the kind of neighborhood they want to be in. So it's a win-win.
Now, as you mentioned, there are a lot of opinions out there on this project, and you and the entire board has been out for the last couple of months since the announcement was made that Arlington had been selected back in November, to engage with Arlingtonians and to hear some of their concerns. What are some of the, at the high level, concerns that you kind of heard, the themes that you heard across the board throughout the process?
Well, Eric, I don't know about you, but for me, the engagement that we did was reaffirming to a great degree, because no matter what civic association or community group that I went to, very much heard the same general approach, a receptivity to understanding what the benefit is for Arlington, and once explained, understanding why the board pursued this. But then, in every pocket of the county, wanting to make sure that we had an awareness and plans to deal with impacts that we expect to materialize with transportation and congestion, housing, most top of mind, maybe even perhaps growth in the school enrollment population. And once hearing about the resources from the state and some of the plans that we have to address those, what I heard uniformly was, we understand that this is absolutely a positive step forward for our community. Just make sure you don't keep your eye off of the ball and you deal with these other consequences. And we understand why we need to do this.
I think it's well said, Christian. And I would say the universal theme that I heard was people want to know, kind of what you just said, Christian, is that we know what we're doing, that we have a plan. Let's face it, housing, affordability, and the shortage of housing, that was an issue long before we ever talked about Amazon coming, and it's an issue we have to deal with. Making sure that we're making investments in our transportation infrastructure, that was something that we know we have to do, and we need to do it, and now we've got more resources to do it. We also, and I think maybe in the case of schools, we have crowded schools. We know we need to build more schools. The county board is working with the school board to make sure that we find the options to do that. But also what Amazon coming, it's not only about the additional tax revenue that Amazon's going to bring. It's not only about those additional state monies that we're bringing in. It's about this opportunity to focus the community, that we get this chance to everyone, let's look at these issues. Let's talk about what do we need to do to make sure that we're meeting these challenges. And I think by and large, I think what we all found in one way or the other, no matter what group that you're talking to, is a sense of optimism that this is taking us into the future and we can meet the challenges that we face.
I know a lot of folks have wondered whether Amazon's decision to not proceed with the New York half of the HQ2, if that's going to affect Arlington in any way. Where does that stand currently?
Well, I think it's important to remember that when Amazon was looking to site a headquarters location and there was this big number of 50,000 jobs, that was a projection. That's not something that they know that they're iteratively going to do. It's going to be based on how their business grows, if it grows. So I think the decision to pull out of New York just means Amazon looks at all of the other places that they have targeted. So we know Arlington is one, but they're still in Seattle. And to my understanding, they have about 17 other communities in the country where they have investments. So they have the room to grow to meet their needs for the foreseeable future. And if that changes and they invest more here in Arlington over time, that's a conversation we can have at a later date.
But as of now, our agreement stands as it did on day one of the announcement.
Nothing's changed.
The agreement stands, and it's in the news lately that other local jurisdictions are still going after and trying. And I think that Arlington, it's really the philosophy that we had all the way through this, going back to the very early stages when the state first put forth our bid and then entered negotiations with Amazon. We as a board, we maintained from the get-go, we're going to stay the course. We believe in who we are. We're not bending over backwards. We're not doing anything crazy. We don't have to. We have already the infrastructure, the community that they sought after. We've got the talent that they want. And I think we're sticking with that philosophy that we've got it all going on right here. You want to come be a part of our community, then we're going to welcome them. If they want to grow, we're going to encourage them to grow as fast and as much as they can. And we're also going to encourage within our plans.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're also going to continue to look at You know, we've used this analogy that if we've been whale hunting and we've caught the whale, well, now we've got lots of other fish to go after and make sure that we're addressing the needs of our small businesses and growing the businesses that are already here and helping them to grow. So we've always taken that balance, and I think we're just going to keep going with that.
Now, where do we go from here? What is the timeline? I know another big misperception was that everything was happening all at once.
Right.
Tomorrow.
Right.
But that's not what's happening. This is a long-term process.
Yeah.
Give me an idea of the ramp up here.
Well, you know, the performance agreement and the public conversations that we've had over the last couple of months have been unusual for Arlington. We don't typically do all of this. From this point forward, it starts to get very familiar. So Amazon is going to occupy some leased space in Crystal City. They're going to be bringing in employees by the hundreds this year, not anything larger than that. And then they have a phase up of the number of employees they expect to bring into Arlington in the subsequent years. And in no year do they expect any more than 3,500 or so employees to come. So in order to accommodate that, they want to build some permanent facilities, not just occupy leased space. And that's where they go through the very tried and true and familiar Arlington processes of developing plans for real estate, going to the community to socialize those plans, then formally submitting them to our Department of Planning, and going through the very public processes that involve stakeholders on looking at that particular site, going through site plan review committee meetings, and ultimately the Planning Commission and other associated commissions, as well as final board approval. So everything from here on out is going to look a lot like we've all done. Right.
All right. Well, we will obviously be continuing the conversation as those site plans move forward and the company continues to, become a part of Arlington's community. So on that, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll talk about some of the other key actions the board took at its March meeting. It wasn't just Amazon all the time. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Kara O'Donnell, your host for County Board Wrap Up. With me today are County Board Chair Christian Dorsey and Board Member Eric Gutschall, giving us that behind-the-scenes look at the key decisions the County Board took at its March meeting. Now, before the break, we were obviously talking about the Amazon HQ2, but what folks may have missed in the conversation is this gave life to a whole new initiative to help deal with the housing challenges that we had been discussing before. Tell me a little bit about Housing Arlington.
Oh, Kara, I'm so excited about the Housing Arlington initiative, and I think it's really exemplary of what is somewhat unique and so special about Arlington, that our history has been one of citizen-driven planning, and this is all about how are we going to make sure that we meet the housing needs. So there's no question in the conversation about Amazon, and even before Amazon's arrival, housing has been top of mind for Arlingtonians. It's very hard. Almost no matter what income level you're at, but very hard to find housing in Arlington. And we've had these sort of disparate programs. We've had, through our Affordable Housing Master Plan and our Affordable Housing Investment Fund that developers contribute to, that we contribute from the general fund to each year, looking at developing subsidized, committed affordable units for those making usually below 60% of area median income. We have other programs that look at other ways for permanent supportive housing and other aspects of the population, but we've never really taken a holistic look. So this is all about looking holistically. This initiative will be, it's the ask of the board of our staff that they will be coming back to us in April with a set of options to begin to look at these community conversations about what are the different tools. We've been talking about missing middle housing for housing, different housing options and types for those in the middle income of 80 to 120% of area median income. And it's all going to be grounded, and this is what's so neat, in eye towards equity, stability, and adaptability. And those are the key guiding principles. It's really going to be exciting, and folks should stay tuned and look forward to the opportunities to talk about how we can modernize our zoning ordinance, how we're going to develop new financial tools to incentivize new kinds of housing that we just don't see right now in the county, and there's a lot more to come.
And the vote on Amazon really kind of helped pave the way for this kind of initiative, bring it to the forefront, correct?
Well, this is something that we've been planning to do for a while. It's bringing together all of the various desires of board members and what we're hearing from the community to really get at the current issues that are facing people when it comes to housing affordability. Amazon certainly, I think, accelerated and gave it a little bit more juice, but that's the same with a lot of these conversations that we're having in our region. The Amazon announcement has really, I think, just given that clarity to everyone that this is not anything that we can sort of put on the agenda for later. We have to actually do it now, and that's what you're seeing with us.
Okay, we will see where that comes forward. Now, I know the board also adopted some changes with regards to the Childcare Initiative. We talked about this initiative last month here on County Board Rep, but what was the actual vote this month?
So this is terrifically exciting, and certainly very exciting for one of the county board members who will be hopefully availing herself of childcare at some point very, very soon. But we've taken an important step in dealing with what is a real concern in Arlington, our having the most unaffordable childcare in the entire country. And when we've looked at why that is, it's really come down to our having a lack of supply to meet the demand for childcare in our community. And then when we sort of peel the layers on the onion on that, we realize that there's some structural barriers to creating childcare slots. And we had an intensive community-focused effort to understand what those barriers were and what we could do to eliminate and reduce them. So, a couple of years ago, we looked at just where we allow for new businesses to locate and made a change where we allowed childcare to be considered a retail use as part of zoning approvals. And then this is looking even more deeply at the zoning ordinance and recognizing that in some cases we had limits on the number of slots that could be in a certain facility, and that was disconnected from state requirements as well as federal best practices. So just imagine aligning Arlington with the Commonwealth of Virginia and with national best practices has created the ability for a lot more slots to be created in Arlington. And then we also removed a very key educational barrier, which was preventing people from employing qualified child care workers. So there are a lot of different things that we did, increasing the number of slots available, reducing the ratios for the number of qualified caregivers per child to better align with best practices and state standards. And all of these we expect will at least encourage more child care slots to become available. So we're attacking supply, but we've also removed an educational barrier that didn't make any sense and changed it so that it could focus on providing quality child care. So I think we've taken a very important step in making sure that we can make child care of higher quality and more readily available and hopefully at lower cost.
I was going to say a whole new level of opportunity for Arlingtonians looking for that coveted child care options.
Indeed.
All right. Well, moving on, the board approved a site plan for the Queens Court development back in 2017, I think it was.
Like
but it came up again at this month's meeting. Yeah. What was the new development here?
Nothing new, just good stuff, right?
Well, good stuff's always good, but
some of this is, this is the day-to-day kind of, frankly, nitty-gritty running of the county government that sometimes the board has to take. Legal action really is what it amounts to, because staff is driving. We have excellent staff that negotiate the terms of our Affordable Housing Investment Fund contribution, the gap financing that we offer to these affordable housing projects. And the loan documents can get very sophisticated and very complicated, and there's lots of rules, and it goes through the state. And this was really just our action to, we had to amend the site plan just to accommodate a specific requirement that the Virginia Housing Development Authority had. And so it really was just following through on the intent that had already been voted on and adopted by the board. But I think it's important for the community just to understand that that we've got a lot of folks that work really, really hard on very pernicious little details to make sure that we get these things right. And that's what this was about.
Okay. And now the loan's been approved, so the project can fully proceed, and at the end of the day, it's going to mean the replacement of 39 units of affordable housing with nearly 250 units of affordable housing in the Roslyn area, so close to transit. So, we're glad to see that we've taken the sort of final hurdle in getting this project moving towards construction.
All right, I'm sure that will be a coveted location once
Indeed.
it's completed. Now, the board also set a couple of important public hearings for April, one about our bicycle infrastructure and the other about our parks and open spaces. What can you tell me about this bicycle element with the master transportation plan?
So, Arlington is known as a community that has very much embraced cycling as a transportation option. And one of the ways in which that's manifest is that we have an element of our master transportation plan which includes bicycles.
Okay.
And so, one, we're sending a very clear signal that this is not just about recreation, this is not just about people who may choose cycling as an avocation. This is a critical part of a multimodal transportation network in an area where we prioritize not necessarily growing the public right-of-way to accommodate all users. We've been innovative in figuring out how to develop connectivity and ways of sharing the road space that really make it better for not only make it possible for everyone to use it, but for everyone to use it more safely. So again, with our staff, they've worked with the community on coming up with an important update to the bicycle plan to identify areas where we need to prioritize new connections, improve existing connections, and look at ways of designing roads so that they can be safer for cars, pedestrians, bicyclists alike.
Now, and this plan hadn't been updated in probably a decade
That's
or
right,
so.
yeah.
And of course, bicycles and bicycle use has changed a lot in
goodness,
Arlington
hasn't it? Wow.
in the past decade. Tell me a little bit about how you used that kind of insight into just the changing methods of transit around Arlington.
Well, one of the things that makes transit work is what's known in the industry in wonky terms, the first mile, last mile.
Right.
And bikes are really, really good for that. So if you think about if you need to get from your point of origin, which might be your home, to a transit stop, that bicycle is often a good way to do that. And so we have seen the evolution of that, and we've seen through the years, the more that we invest in making biking safer and more comfortable and more convenient, the more people that are choosing that. And the more people that choose that, if you can get to the transit stop, then you are more likely to use transit. Then that gets people out of their cars and off the roads. So we're really seeing that the rapid increase in the number of people who are choosing to bike. And so this is really our way of saying, we're going to take this element of our master transportation plan, we're going to update it to make sure that we are not just looking at how do we accommodate where we are today, but how are we going to accommodate future growth, continued use, and encourage that continued shifting of folks to biking. And it can be for recreational purposes, it can be to get to work, to do your daily errands. So it's kind of all of the above, all of those different reasons, all different age groups, folks of all different abilities. You don't have to be wearing spandex and have the serious bike to be a biker in Arlington, right? You don't even have to be a full-time biker. You can use Capital Bike Share.
Right.
So you can just, an occasional biker. But every time someone makes a choice to bike somewhere, they are choosing
Not to use a car.
not to use a car potentially. And so that's a win. That makes the overall transportation network function better. So this is really just our way of saying, hey, we're gonna plan for the future. And this was the advertisement. So we will actually be adopting that next month. So encourage folks to take a look, and if you have comments, we'll want to hear from you. And we're looking forward to adopting it next
Now,
month.
does this update specifically target the bicycles, or does it also include those other two-wheeled?
Well, the world has changed since we did this in 2005.
Exactly. I was like, these scooters didn't exist
That's right.
in 2008. I mean, at least not in the public realm for the most part.
No, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when we last did this, there really wasn't capital bike share. So the only part of a bicycle plan was to look at those people who owned a personal bicycle and who were willing to use it. Now we have people who don't even have to own it,
Right.
and they can do capital bike share. There are dockless systems of electric bikes. Even, I guess, the dockless system of non-electric bikes, that market has gone away, but we've got the electric bikes, and we've also got scooters. Who knows what else
Who knows
is
what
coming?
we'll have 10 years from now.
That's right. But yeah, so we have to, all of this has gone into the thinking for the current update, how to make sure all of these various uses contribute to the goals that Eric talked about, solving that first last mile problem, giving people the option to not have a single occupancy vehicle as their primary method of travel. The more options that we have, the more you reduce the need for people to make what are choices that overall hurt our sustainability, increase congestion, and all of the associated negative externalities with that. And Arlington continues to be on the vanguard in the region.
Well, you know what, Christian? Even if in the future we're all riding around on maglev, hoverboards, the truth is that the one thing that is a constant and that this plan is focused on is the connectivity of the network and making sure you have your trails and your bike lanes and all that infrastructure all connects and goes from where you want to go to where you want to, where you are to where you want to get to. Yeah. And so it's really we're building in the future here.
Yeah.
We'll see how that evolves and kind of keep that network going.
Yeah, teleportation might solve all of this stuff.
There you go. There you go.
We'll need a teleportation plan.
Well, on that note, that brings us to the end of another County Board wrap-up. Thank you very much, Christian and Eric, for joining us today to go over some of the big decisions the board took at its March meeting. We'll see you again next month when we'll be talking about the board's adoption of the fiscal year 2020 budget, as well as the calendar year tax rate, among other things. Remember, all of the county board meetings are open to the public and they're live streamed and archived on our website, arlingtonva.us, and just search County Board. And if you want to tell us what you think about these and other issues, just visit the county website. That's topics.arlingtonva.us/engage. I'm Kara O'Donnell, and we'll see you next month right here on County Board Wrap Up.